So we're gonna go over first this table. What makes the table unique about the Lotus Bridge Saw? So most tables that are out in the industry, bridge saws, when they tilt up, they will tilt about 75 to 80% of the construction of the machine, of the table. They will tilt 80% of the weight of the table up, which is a lot of stress on the hinges and on the pistons. And you'll notice that most tables, when they're tilting up, they start trembling a little bit, which causes torsion over time of the bottom frame and the frame that's holding the slabs. What did we decide to do on the Lotus Bridge Saw? We created a table where, if you look underneath here, we've got the base section. So the braking mechanisms are inside of this base, so they're protected from the humidity and the slurry. Then we have this middle section that's also teal here, which is spinning on about a yard diameter, maybe a little less, 32-inch diameter slew ring, which is perfectly machined on the top and the bottom. So the quality of the rotation of the table is much better when you have to turn the table for a different cutting position. When you're doing miters, it's better for your measurements. So we also have brake blocks that are adjustable sideways, because on a lot of machines, the fixed position brake blocks are welded onto the body of the machine. When they rust over time, they lose their accuracy of position. These are zinc coated brake blocks, we call them, which are adjustable in case that they lose their position over time. You can readjust them and always square up your table perfectly. The top portion of the table is called the grill, which is this white portion here. You're gonna see 1, 2, 3 hinges. When we tilt our table up, we're only tilting up the white grill plus the concrete table right here on the top. Now, the other thing that we recommend and that we do on this table is that before we pour the concrete form, we create a layer. And if you look underneath the table, you're gonna see that there's a layer here of shower pan liner. Some guys use aluminum sheet, and before we build up the wood and pour concrete on top of the plywood, we create this layer that acts as a barrier. So when the wood that normally people just put plywood here on the bottom before they pour the concrete, the water will seep through the concrete and the plywood, and then the water starts to leak down, and it gets all of the chassis of this whole underneath portion of the table wet with slurry falling down eventually in water. So what this liner here creates is a barrier, so all the water that eventually seeps off the table goes immediately to the exteriors of the table, which preserves the life and it causes less rusting on the table. So always put a liner before you put plywood, before you pour your concrete on your bridge saw tables. So now, the way that this table works is it's got 2 braking mechanisms, which we'll go over to the switches so you can see how to activate them. They're both by air. So we have a fixed position brake that is a piston that goes up or down by air, that's located in one part of the base of the table, which is right here in the rear. And you can see right there, the piston is not activated, it's lowered right now. And it goes inside the brake block. The brake block in the center, you can't see it from here, but inside this center part right here is a converse shaped hole, which is conical. It's like a cone, but an inverted cone. And then the piston over here, the point of it, it's conical. So it goes into a perfectly matching shape inversely on the brake block in order to create a braking. And so there's 6 positions brakes, north, south, east, and west, and 1 northeast and 1 southwest. And those are our fixed position brakes that are common positions for us when we're rotating the table to lock the piston. Now, inside the table, you cannot see it, but there is an internal disc that rotates with the table, but it's rotating inside of the base, where there is a pneumatic brake pad clamp that works just like the brake caliper on a car wheel. And so that's called the any position brake. So in case you got a weird angle, you have a method to lock the table in any position. And now we'll show you where the switches are. When I want to use that fixed brake, I manually align the brake with the right braking position. Always go back there and check and make sure that the piston is more or less underneath the solid part of the brake block. When you look at the brake blocks, you see that into the center, it has a solid part that's about 2 inches wide. Once you're there, you hit the fixed brake to lock. Right now it's unlocked. Right there it is locked, okay? Now, here's the any position brake, which is also locked, because you can have this always locked when you lock this. And when you need to be in a weird angle that doesn't coincide with the fixed position brakes positions, which is only 6 positions, you leave this unlocked, you would leave this one, you rotate it, and then you lock this where you need to lock it, okay? Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over to the piston to film it so you can see it going up and down. It's gonna rise up. Ready? Yep. Did you see it go up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, what you don't wanna do, stay right there. When I turn the table, some guys, they turn the table only. They turn the table only. That's too far out. But now look at what happens when I ignite the brake. It doesn't want to go in, right? So what they'll do, this is what not to do, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I'm turning the table right now with my own brute force, and I'm causing that piston to have friction sideways and then drop into the brake. That's not what you want to do. Okay, so that was an example of what not to do if you want your braking mechanism to last a long time and be accurate. Because what this will cause, it will cause that the 4 cap head bolts that are around that fixed brake will eventually become loose. Not to mention that internally that cylinder going in and out of that bronze sleeve right there is going to consume itself, get crooked or break, and become loose and give you issues with your braking system. Okay? Only takes a couple seconds to walk to the back, make sure that you're in good position, go back and lock the table. Okay? As far as tilting the table, when you tilt the table, you want to make sure that your brakes are activated. Okay? You're at the 0 position here. The bridge must be all the way to the back, the head must be all the way to the left, and the head must be all the way up. In order for me to come over here and put here I can have the pump on or off. I'm gonna hit this system on. I have the hydraulic pump on here. And now I'm flipping the table up by hitting up. Now you don't want to hit the selector switch until the table begins to start to tremble towards the end. You just want to get it close within 10%, close to this maximum limit. Now you can tell where the maximum limit is on the hydraulic cylinders over here. You can see here. So that's about how much room I have left to keep tilting it, where you see this chrome space right here. This sleeve is eventually going to touch here, which you don't want to keep jamming the hydraulic pressure to jam in there. So you're going to stop that ahead of time. Right now, it's a decent position enough for me to also load a slab. So you want to come up to a position that's decent enough to load a slab. And how would we load a slab? We are going to take the 2 metal posts that are right here that are zinc coated. That's it. And that's it. And there you go. Now, if I wanted to come up a little bit more, I keep my eye on the cylinders. Okay, do I need to come up more than this? No, I don't. So I load my slab and I simply hit down on the selector switch. And the pump's already graduated, so it'll come down nice and slowly where it's not too abrupt. But as you can see, only 30% of the total table weight is tilting up instead of having to go through the strain of tilting up 80% of a table's weight. Done. How do we calibrate our brakes to make sure that when you turn your table and you activate your brake for 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, every fixed position brake on the Lotus Bridge Saw, which is 6 positions, is going to be perfectly square. How do we achieve perfect square brakes all the time? Even in 2 years from now, when the brake might come out of position, how do we readjust it so that we get back to perfection on the brake position, okay? So we're gonna go over that principle right now, and it all has to do with how we designed our brake blocks, all right? As far as I know, right now, Poseidon is the only company that has brake blocks like this. So we're gonna go through how they work and why we feel it's the best option for brake blocks. Okay, so here we go. Here's the brake block itself, okay? It's being held into the table right now by 2 hex head bolts, okay? And they're right here, the big hex head bolts. These are pressing the brake up into the table and keeping it in position. Around the hex head bolts, you can't really see from this angle, but they have an ovular hole. It's an ovular hole, okay? It looks like almost like an eyelid. So it's got an ovular hole, which allows me that if I loosen these 2 hex head bolts about 1/2 to 3/4 of a turn, the brake block will have tension released against it, and I'll be able to move the brake block sideways along the grooves. If I don't have this piston in it, obviously, okay? Right now, the piston is activated into the brake block. But let's say that I have a piece on the table and I am gonna use an L square. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a cut with the machine onto the table that's only about 1/4 inch deep into the table. Then what I'm gonna do is that 1/4 inch deep blade cut, what I will do is that I will then turn the table to 90 degrees. And at 90 degrees, I will hold an L square up to the initial cut that was done at 0, which will be perpendicular to my 90-degree cut. I don't really have to do a 90-degree cut. What I'll do is I'll use the laser that's perfectly aligned with the blade, and I will compare that on my L square and see how far the degree position and which rotation side, clockwise or counterclockwise, do I have to rotate the table in order to get that 90-degree perfect. And what I'm going to do in that case is I would loosen these 2 bolts that are holding up that brake block. Now, if you notice, there's 2 small horizontal lock bolts that are on either side of that brake block, okay? Those little bolts, what they do is once I find my position that I like for the brake block and I tighten these 2 hex head holding bolts, I'm gonna close these bolts and tighten them up against the brake block so they cannot deviate sideways, all right? When I adjust the brake, conversely, I'm gonna loosen those bolts and release the 2 side bolts so they go towards the outside and allow me to have space that that brake can float or move. And what I would do is that I would make the piston, it's activated right now, but if I loosen these side bolts right now, and I loosen these hex head bolts slightly to release tension on this brake, and I turn the table in the direction that I have to so that my laser is aligned with my cut to a perfect 90, once I find that position, I will retighten these 2 bolts, and then I will tighten the lock bolts. And that's how I easily can fix every single brake on this table. I can go one by one and compare the prior perpendicular cut with the laser line in an L square, and I can tighten up all my brake blocks. You can also contact service at Poseidon Machinery and we will send you videos and we will show you how to do this if you need to virtually. Okay, thank you. Hydraulic pump for the table. So very simple. This is the backflow valve. This graduates only how fast the table will lower, okay? Now, on this hydraulic pump here, if you want more flow to lift up a little bit more, there's gonna be that adjustment bolt in here to increase the flow of the hydraulics. And once again, if you want the exact SOP, you can contact service, but there's not much to the hydraulic pump.